People think the worst part of cancer is hearing the diagnosis. It isn't. The worst part is discovering who quietly starts planning a future without you. My name is Walter Brennan. I'm 66 years old. 3 months ago, my oncologist looked across her desk, folded her hands, and said the sentence every person hopes they'll never hear. You have lymphoma. For a few seconds, I couldn't hear anything else. Her lips kept moving. Treatment, chemotherapy, side effects, survival rates, appointments. All I could think about was my late wife, Evelyn. She used to joke that she'd leave this world before me because she refused to watch me become an old, grumpy man. She got her wish. A heart attack took her 6 years ago. Ever since then, my son became my only immediate family. His name is Brennan, 38 years old, successful, confident, always in a hurry. When he was little, he never slept unless I sat beside his bed. When he broke his arm riding his bicycle, I spent 2 nights sleeping upright in a hospital chair. When he failed algebra in 10th grade, I stayed awake until 2 in the morning every night for 3 months helping him study. I never kept score. Doctorants aren't supposed to. At least, that's what I believed. Cancer has a funny way of making you count things you never counted before. The number of pills, the number of hospital visits, the number of people who stop calling. My first chemotherapy appointment was scheduled for a Monday morning. 8 o'clock, the hospital was 35 minutes away. My doctor had warned me not to drive afterward. The first treatment affects everyone differently. Please arrange for someone to take you home. I smiled. My son will. I actually believed that the night before treatment, I texted Brennan, "Can you take me to chemo tomorrow morning? I have to be there by 8. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Finally, my phone buzzed. Uber isn't that expensive. That was it. One sentence, no question, no apology, no explanation. Just, Uber isn't that expensive. I stared at the screen longer than I'd like to admit. Maybe he'd sent it too quickly. Maybe he was stressed. Maybe he'd call. Instead, 3 little dots appeared again. Another message arrived. This one wasn't written the way Brennan usually texted. There were too many emojis, too many periods, too much attitude. I knew exactly who had typed it before I even opened it. His wife. You're not dying today, Eng. Figure it out yourself. I read it once, then again. Not because I couldn't believe it, because I wanted to make sure I'd never forget it. I didn't reply, didn't argue, didn't ask why. I simply locked my phone and placed it face down on the kitchen table. The coffee beside me had already gone cold. I poured it into the sink, made another cup, fed my old golden retriever Baxter, watered the tomato plants Evelyn had planted before she passed away. Then I ironed a clean blue shirt. People imagine that heartbreak looks dramatic. It usually doesn't. Sometimes it looks like an old man carefully ironing a shirt because keeping his hands busy is easier than letting his mind wander. At 6:45 the next morning, I stepped outside. The air was cool. The neighborhood was quiet. An Uber pulled into my driveway right on time. The driver rolled down the window. "Morning, Walter." I blinked. "You know my name?" He grinned. "It's on the app." I laughed for the first time in 2 days. My mistake. He climbed out before I could stop him. Tall, broad shoulders, gray beard, probably around my age. He walked around the car and opened the passenger door.
"Take your time, no rush."
It was such a small gesture, but after the text I'd received the night before, it nearly broke me. Halfway to the hospital, he glanced at me. "First treatment?" I nodded. "My wife went through chemo. I'm sorry. So am I." We drove another mile in silence. Then he asked something no one else had. "Are you scared?" I almost lied. Instead, I answered honestly. "More than I've ever been." He nodded like he understood, because he did. When we reached the cancer center, I reached for my wallet. He stopped me. "No, I've got it." I frowned. "The ride's already paid through the app, I know." He smiled gently. "I'm talking about this." Before I could ask what he meant, he walked inside the hospital with me. He didn't work there. He wasn't related to me. He wasn't even obligated to leave his car. Yet somehow, a complete stranger walked beside me into the oncology wing, while my own son couldn't spare 35 minutes. As the automatic doors opened, a nurse looked up from the reception desk. The moment she saw the man beside me, her entire expression changed. She smiled and said, "You're back again?" The driver smiled warmly. "Yeah." I couldn't stay away. I looked at him, Confused, back again? What exactly did she mean? I looked at the driver, then at the nurse, then back again. She smiled at him the way people smile at someone they've known for years. Not a patient, not an employee, someone who belonged there. The driver scratched the back of his neck. I'll explain later. The nurse laughed. You always say that. He shrugged, and I usually do. Before I could ask another question, she handed me a clipboard. Mr. Brennan, we'll need your insurance card and a signature. I sat down in the waiting room. The driver took a chair across from me. He wasn't checking his phone. He wasn't looking impatient. He simply waited. 10 minutes later, a nurse called my name. Mr. Brennan? I stood. The driver stood too. The nurse smiled. Family can come back for the consultation. I immediately shook my head. Oh, he's not family. The driver smiled politely. No, I'm just the Uber driver. The nurse looked genuinely surprised. Oh, then she smiled again. Well, you're welcome anyway. An hour later, the chemotherapy began. People imagine treatment rooms are filled with crying. They aren't. Mostly, they're quiet. Too quiet. Everyone is fighting a battle you can't see. Across from me sat a young mother reading a picture book to her 6-year-old daughter. Beside me, an elderly man slept through most of his infusion. Near the window, a teenager watched cartoons while his mother pretended not to cry. Cancer doesn't care how old you are or what plans you had. It simply arrives. 3 hours later, the treatment ended. Standing up felt like climbing a mountain. My legs were weak, my stomach rolled. Everything tasted like metal. A nurse helped me into a wheelchair. We'll take you downstairs. I nodded weakly. When the elevator doors opened, there he was, the Uber driver, still waiting. He stood the moment he saw me. How'd it go? I've had better Mondays. He smiled. He thanked the nurse, took my overnight bag, opened the passenger door, buckled my seatbelt himself because my hands were trembling too badly. I felt embarrassed. He acted like it was the most normal thing in the world. Halfway home, neither of us spoke. Then he suddenly asked, "Do you live alone?" "I do. No children nearby. I have one." He glanced at me. "The one who texted?" I nodded. He didn't criticize my son, didn't roll his eyes, didn't call him selfish. Instead, he asked, "Was he always like that?" The question caught me off guard. I stared out the window. No, he used to be different. I remembered another Monday morning, 30 years earlier. Brandon was 8. He had pneumonia. His fever wouldn't break. I carried him from the house to my truck wrapped in my winter coat because I was afraid the cold air would make him worse. The entire drive, he kept whispering, "Don't leave me, Dad." I promised him I wouldn't, and I didn't. Not once, not during the emergency room visit, not during the IV, not during the overnight stay. I spent 22 hours sitting beside his hospital bed because that's what parents do. The driver quietly listened, then said something I'll never forget. Children never remember every sacrifice. They only remember the ones you didn't make. I smiled sadly. That's probably true, but parents remember all of them. When we reached my house, I reached for my wallet again. "Please, at least let me tip you." He shook his head. "No, you've already paid enough today." He carried my small bag inside, set it beside the couch, filled a glass of water from the kitchen sink, placed it next to my medication, then looked around. "You have food? I'll manage." He opened the refrigerator, 1 yogurt, half a loaf of bread, bustard, milk, nothing else. He quietly closed the door. "You staying here? I don't have anywhere else." He nodded once. "I'll be back." Before I could ask what he meant, he left. I assumed that was the end of it. I fell asleep on the couch. When I woke up nearly 2 hours later, someone was knocking on the front door. I slowly opened it. The driver stood there holding 4 grocery bags: soup, fresh fruit, bread, chicken, juice, medicine for nausea, even dog food for Baxter. I stared at him. I didn't order groceries. I know, I did. I immediately tried handing the bags back. "I can't accept this," he smiled. Neither could my wife. That sentence stopped me. He looked toward the sky for a moment. "She fought ovarian cancer. For 4 years, I used to drive strangers during the day and take care of her at night." His voice remained calm, but his eyes told the rest of the story. "When she died, I couldn't stop driving. It was the only place I didn't feel alone." I slowly lowered the grocery bag. "You still never told me why the nurse knew you." He smiled. Because every Monday, I volunteer here, picking up patients who don't have anyone. I blinked. You don't charge them? No, never have. My throat tightened. So why did you charge me? He laughed softly. Because if I'd accepted it as a volunteer ride, you would have refused. I couldn't help smiling. He had figured me out within a few hours. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out a simple business card, no company logo, just a name, Mason Doyle underneath it, one handwritten sentence, call me before every treatment. I looked at him. I couldn't ask you to do that, he smiled. You didn't, I offered. Before leaving, he bent down and scratched Baxter behind the ears. The old dog wagged his tail like they'd known each other forever. As Mason walked back toward his car, my phone buzzed. For one ridiculous second, I hoped it was Brandon. It wasn't. It was my bank. Large purchase approved. Mercer Family Shard Credit Card Demont, 8742, Boit 16 location. Aspen Ridge Luxury Resort. I stared at the notification, then remembered something that made my stomach drop. Brandon still had access to the emergency credit card I'd added him 2 years ago, the one I'd specifically kept for medical emergencies. I read the notification 3 times, 8742.16 Aspen Ridge Luxury Resort. I closed my eyes. That wasn't just any credit card. It was the one Evelyn and I had opened years ago. The agreement between us had been simple. Leave one card untouched. If life ever blindsides us, we'll never have to choose between health and money. After Evelyn died, I kept the card. I almost cancelled it dozens of times. But something always stopped me, maybe habit, maybe hope. When Brandon bought his first home, I added him as an authorized user. Only for emergencies. I had told him. He hugged me. I'll probably never use it. He was right for almost 9 years. He never did. Until now, I opened the banking app. The transaction wasn't pending. It had already gone through. Spa package, luxury suite, fine dining, weekend reservation. I quietly locked my phone. Not because I was angry, because I was tired, so unbelievably tired. Tuesday morning, my body felt like it belonged to someone else. Walking from the bedroom to the kitchen took almost 10 minutes. Baxter followed me everywhere, as if he knew something wasn't right. Around noon, the phone rang. Brandon. I stared at his name. 5 rings. 6. Finally, I answered. Hi, Dad. His voice sounded cheerful, too cheerful. How are you feeling? Like someone poured concrete into my bones. He laughed awkwardly. Chemo, huh? I suppose. A few seconds passed, then he cleared his throat. So, I got a fraud alert from the bank. I forgot you still get notified whenever I use that card. There it was. Not an apology, an explanation. As long as you know, I was going to tell you. When? After the trip. The trip, he laughed again. Vanessa's been under a lot of stress. I wanted to surprise her. I looked at the calendar hanging in my kitchen. Monday, Tuesday, the dates blurred together. My first chemotherapy treatment was yesterday. I know. And today, you wanted to discuss a vacation. Silence. Finally, he sighed. Dad, you've always said life has to go on. I almost smiled. He remembered the sentence. He'd just forgotten when it applied. I also taught you that responsibilities come before luxuries. He didn't answer. Instead, he said, I'll pay the card back. I'm sure you will. Another silence. Then he asked, You're not mad, are you? I looked around my empty kitchen, at Baxter sleeping near my feet, at the untouched bowl of soup Mason had insisted I freeze for later. No, I'm disappointed. Those words seemed to bother him far more than shouting ever could. He ended the call 5 minutes later, without saying, I love you. That evening, someone knocked on my front door, Mason holding 2 paper cups. I figured hospital coffee wasn't enough punishment. I laughed. It isn't. He handed me 1 cup, then noticed my expression. Bad day? My son used my emergency medical card. He didn't ask how much, didn't ask why. He simply nodded. You want to tell me about him? I surprised myself. I did for almost an hour. Not about yesterday, about everything. How Brandon loved astronomy as a kid, how we'd spent entire summers building model rockets, how every Saturday morning meant pancakes shaped like dinosaurs, how after Evelyn died, something changed. Not overnight. Slowly phone calls became texts. Texts became excuses. Visits became holidays. Then holidays became, next month, Dad. Mason listened without interrupting. When I finished, he quietly asked, when was the last time your son came here just to spend time with you? I searched my memory. Christmas? No. That had only been 40 minutes. Before that, Thanksgiving, no. He left after dessert. I kept going backwards. Birthdays. Father's Day. Last summer, the answer finally hit me. 18 months. Mason nodded. I figured. You figured? You keep looking toward the driveway. I frowned. What? Every few minutes. You expect his car. I hadn't even realized I was doing it. Friday afternoon, my phone rang again. This time it was the oncology clinic. Mr. Brennan, this is just a reminder. Your next treatment is Monday at 8. We recommend someone accompany you if possible. I smiled. I have someone. After hanging up, I looked at Mason's card sitting beside the coffee maker. Then I picked up the phone before I could dial. Another call came in. Brandon, I answered. Hello? His voice sounded rushed. Dad, I need a favor. I nearly laughed, not because it was funny, because somehow I wasn't surprised. My accountant says removing me from that emergency card will hurt my credit history. So, can you leave it active for another year? I said nothing. He kept talking. I promise I won't use it again. I just don't want any complications. I slowly looked toward the family photo hanging above the fireplace. Evelyn was smiling. Brandon was 12. His front tooth was missing. His arm was around my shoulders. We looked happy, really happy. I quietly took the framed photograph off the wall, opened the back. A folded envelope slipped into my lap. I had completely forgotten it was there. Evelyn's handwriting covered the front. For Walter, only if you ever have to choose between protecting our son and protecting yourself. My heart stopped. I didn't remember her writing it. I didn't even remember putting it inside the frame. Brandon was still talking on the phone. Dad, are you there? I stared at Evelyn's handwriting without saying another word. I ended the call and slowly opened the envelope. For a long time, I just stared at the envelope. Evelyn's handwriting hadn't changed. It couldn't. She'd been gone 6 years. But somehow, seeing those familiar loops and crooked letters made it feel like she'd only stepped into the next room. I carefully unfolded the paper. She had dated it 3 weeks before she died. There were only 2 paragraphs. Walter, if you're reading this, then you're facing something that finally forced you between protecting Brandon and protecting yourself. If that day comes, choose yourself. Not because you love him less, because you've already spent a lifetime proving that you loved him enough. The second paragraph was shorter, but it hurt even more. The hardest lesson I ever learned as a mother is this: sometimes helping your child doesn't teach them love. Sometimes it teaches them that you'll survive anything they do to you. Please don't spend your last years proving that. Come find me with your heart still whole. Love always. Evelyn. I read it 4 times, then folded it exactly the way she'd folded it. For 6 years, the answer had been hanging on my living room wall. I just hadn't been ready to hear it. Monday morning, at 6:50 sharp, Mason's silver SUV rolled into my driveway. He climbed out carrying 2 coffees. Ready? As ready as I'll ever be. Halfway to the hospital, I handed him the envelope. He read it quietly, then returned it without saying a word. After another mile, he finally spoke. Your wife was wise. She usually was. You know what she's really telling you? I think so. She's giving you permission. I nodded. That was exactly the word. Bekense, to stop feeling guilty. Chemo was worse this time. Much worse. By noon, I couldn't stop shaking. The nausea medicine barely worked. Dr. Celia Brooks adjusted my treatment plan. We'll reduce the dosage next session. I don't want you trying to be brave. I smiled weakly. I was a science teacher. We're professionally stubborn. She laughed. I've noticed. Then her expression softened. Mr. Brennan, I've watched hundreds of families go through this. Can I tell you something? Of course. The patients who survive emotionally aren't always the ones surrounded by relatives. They're the ones surrounded by people who choose to be there. Those words stayed with me all the way home. Tuesday morning, I drove to the bank. The manager recognized me immediately. Mr. Brennan, what can I do for you? I'd like to remove an authorized user from one of my accounts. No problem. She pulled up the information. Brandon Mercer? Yes. She clicked a few keys. Done. Anything else? I thought about it. Yes, I'd like to update my emergency contact. She smiled. Certainly. Who should we list? I looked down at the form. For years, Brandon's name had occupied that space. Without hesitation, I wrote. Mason Doyle, the manager, glanced at the form. Your brother? I smiled. No, my friend. It felt strange and strangely right. That afternoon, my phone exploded with notification. Missed call, missed call, missed call. Dozens up. Brandon, then another. Finally, a text. Dad, why did the bank remove me from the card? I didn't answer. Another message. Call me, then another. This is ridiculous. An hour later, Vanessa texted. Are you seriously punishing us while you're sick? I set the phone face down. Baxter rested his head on my knee for once. The silence didn't hurt. It felt peaceful. 3 days later, there was a knock at my front door. Brandon. Vanessa beside him. The moment I opened the door, Brandon spoke first. Dad, I've been trying to reach you. I know. You cancelled my access. Yes, you embarrassed me at the bank. I looked at him carefully. You think this is about embarrassment? He hesitated, then sighed. I said I'd pay it back. I know. Then why are you doing this? For the first time, I didn't defend myself. I didn't explain. I didn't remind him of everything I'd done. Instead, I asked one quiet question. When I asked you for a ride to chemotherapy, what did you think I was really asking for? He frowned. I don't know. A ride? I slowly shook my head. No, I was asking whether my son still had room for me in his life. The porch became silent. Vanessa folded her arms. Oh, come on. Don't make this dramatic. It was one ride. I looked at her. No, it was one answer. Brandon stared at the ground. I continued calmly. You told me to figure it out myself. So, I did. He finally looked up. What does that mean? It means I won't ask again. His face changed. Not because of the credit card. Not because of the money. Because for the first time, he realized I meant it. I wasn't trying to make him feel guilty. I wasn't threatening him. I was simply done waiting. I stepped back toward the doorway. I have another treatment next week. Brandon took a step forward. I can take you. I smiled gently. I already have someone. He looked past me, confused just then. A silver SUV pulled into the driveway. Mason climbed out carrying 2 coffees. Just like every Monday, he waved. Morning, Walter. Then he noticed Brandon standing on the porch. He smiled politely. You must be the son. Brandon nodded. I am. Mason looked at him for a second, then quietly said, I'm glad you finally found time to visit. No anger, no sarcasm, just a simple sentence. Somehow, it landed harder than anything I could have said. Brandon looked at me, then at Mason opening the passenger door for me, and for the first time since my diagnosis, he understood something that couldn't be fixed with an apology. Someone else had already shown up.